Okay, we're now recording.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our session, our panel, Developing and Sustaining a Mentoring Mosaic from an Intergenerational Perspective. My name is Jawanda Grant, and I am the lead for University and Student Affairs at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And during our session today, panelists will share their mentoring stories, strategies, and successes. As outlined by their bios, they represent diverse career stages and experiences. So I'd like to introduce our panelists at this time. So our first panelist is Dr. Chico Rory. He is an associate professor at North Carolina A&T and has a bachelor's in biology from Clark Atlanta University and a PhD in toxicology from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He completed 2 postdocs, one at NYU, I also did, so we have that in common, but in biochemistry, and a second in radiation oncology at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm going to add this piece because this is a networking conference. So he's a native of Monroe, North Carolina. So if any of you are from North Carolina, there's a connection, and graduated from Clark Atlanta in 1998 with a bachelor's in biology. He's currently the director of a cancer genetics and cancer cell biology lab, and he mentors high school, undergrad, master's, and doctoral students. So welcome, Dr. Chico. We have Dr. Keisha Piggott, who serves as co-director of the residency program for ophthalmology in the Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences at Washington University School of Medicine, where she's an assistant professor. Prior to completing her residency in vitreoretinal fellowship at Washington University School of Medicine, she received her medical degree and PhD in immunology from Emory University School of Medicine. Her clinical research interests include the management and treatment of uveal melanoma. Her ongoing commitment to inclusion and diversity in the medical field has been recognized through her work as a Diversity Initiative grant recipient, and she is a faculty diversity scholar. She's also a diplomate of the American Board of Ophthalmology and has numerous professional society affiliations. Welcome, Dr. Keisha. And I hope you are okay with me saying your first name. Whatever you prefer, you can introduce yourselves later. I do that with my kids so they can say our names. So I call you Dr. First Name. So Dr. Danjuma is currently a corporate strategy manager and member of the Strategy Leadership Development Program at AbbVie. And before I keep going, I'm hearing a slight echo. So could everyone mute their mics? Thank you. So I'll start over. Dr. Danjuma Quarles is currently a corporate strategy manager and member of the Strategy Leadership Development Program at AbbVie Inc., a pharmaceutical company in North Chicago. The development program spans 2 years and provides deep exposure to strategic decision-making regarding drug development, intending to create industry leaders in the industry. Prior to this, Dr. Quarles was a senior scientist in computational genomics in the Genomics Research Center at AbbVie. Dr. Quarles earned his PhD in biomedical sciences from the University of California, San Diego, and his undergraduate degrees from Whitworth University in mathematics and bioinformatics. Dr. Quarles is the incoming co-chair of the Career Development Committee for the American Society of Human Genetics and a board member for Degrees of Change, a foundation which prepares diverse homegrown leaders to succeed in college and career, to build more vibrant and equitable communities. Dr. Quarles is pursuing an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and what he says here is his free time. So I'm sure you work really hard during that free time. And last but not least, Miles Bartholomew, future Dr. Miles, is a 2020 graduate of Xavier University of Louisiana, serving as student body president and now on the HBCU Stanford Planning Committee. He is a first-year molecular biology, cellular biology, and biochemistry PhD, sounds like Miles, student at Brown University. His research currently focuses on developmental reproductive genetics. Through the Leadership Alliance, he completed microbiology research at Dartmouth, Brown, and Stanford. Miles strives to make biological discoveries, reinvigorate education as an institution, and cultivate a more equitable academic establishment. So let's welcome all of our panelists. And to get us started, I'll stick with Miles now. So the conference opening yesterday featured an emotionally charged and challenging mosaic of human experiences in 2020. and it was powerfully presented by the Dillard University theater students. So reflecting on this past year, let's start talking about your mentoring relationships this past year, particularly. So with Miles, someone who I consider a mentee, I don't know where I fit, if I'm in your Thrive Mosaic or not, but we had our moments. And I watched you strategically network, Xavier University with your personal and career interests as they evolved. So I know you have great social and interpersonal skills, but then all of a sudden, during your final semester of college, things shut down. So while you were preparing to start a new chapter as a graduate student at Brown, so could you share how mentorship played into your transition from college to first year student, but particularly in the middle of the pandemic, and anything, story-wise that would be helpful for the audience?
Yeah, so hello everybody. I'm Miles, and as Dr. Grant has stated, yes, she is one of my mentors, one that I've had since my freshman year walking to Xavier. It had to be less than a month in that I met Dr. Grant, and we still have a great relationship today. But yes, I have had quite the year, as everyone has with the COVID-19 pandemic. And mentorship has played so many roles and been really crucial to still sustaining, trajectory, my excitement for science, all of those things at the same time. And I think the main reason why mentorship has been so important right now, especially, is because the normal networks that are in place, the normal ways that institutions run, those things got completely obliterated. And if you didn't have somebody that had already made it to the other side, your mentors, the people that you aspire and you're trying to be like, and attain the goals that they already have, it's very difficult to still see the path now that everything's been restructured and shaken. And it takes their foresight and hindsight to kind of understand what pathways are now in place to navigate, and what relationships and what opportunities are still going to be very beneficial to pursue, now that the ones that, the normal, very straightforward, you go meet somebody in person, you say hello, they talk about an opportunity that they have, you send in your application. Those things are kind of stopped, especially when a lot of programs, I think a lot of people that are, in academia or aspiring to be in academia will now realize, my sister was one of them, that summer programs got completely shut down. And for me, like I said, or Dr. Grant had mentioned in my bio, I did Leadership Alliance twice, and I would not be at Brown right now without it. So finding new ways to navigate is something that I would not have understood if it wasn't for the mentors that told me about different opportunities and ways to still stay abreast in the sciences, the fields that I wanted to pursue, and just opportunities in general. So.
I invite any of the other panelists that may want to share, thinking about this past year, how has mentorship played a role in you navigating the challenges of this past year?
I can speak. I think for me, it's important. I've had to remind myself multiple times that, there's no going back to what was, right? And we have to learn how to move forward. I think that's kind of been my moniker for how to move forward, and how to do that in a way where you have to rely on the people around you in new ways, where everyone's figuring out a new system together. No one has the answers, no one has the solutions, and things have been much more dynamic and non-static than they've ever been. So I think for me, it's especially as moving into new roles, is finding people who you can trust, you can communicate with, to create that balance that then can create that self-confidence, right? That can then be that kind of support for everything that you're going through, whether it's work, whether it's school, whether it's your community. You need mentors in every one of those steps to kind of point you towards the right direction.
And I can say something too. So as you mentioned, I'm the co-director for the residency program. So you can imagine, similar to the grad students, that the residents are also kind of now in a state of complete flux the entire year. And so for me, I think the most important thing that I was able to impart to them is that, you have to stay flexible. So being adaptable and flexible are ultimately going to carry you through any challenge you're going to have in life. And so kind of stressing that to them, that it's going to be okay. life will continue to move forward. We are all here to support you. And as long as you keep that open mindset and try not to get tunnel vision, and not think about, well, what am I going to miss out on? Think about how can you adapt to the situation? How can we take care of our patients? How can you still learn and get the tools that you need to be a successful resident when you graduate? And so for me, I think imparting that, because that's kind of something that I've been able to utilize as I've navigated through, staying flexible. And so I think passing that on to them. Also kind of the mental health aspect really came up a lot this year, because you can imagine the stress of being a graduate student or a medical student. And on top of that, now having your schedule just up in the air and not knowing what, literally from day to day, literally not knowing what that was going to look like because of COVID. And so, really stressing to them that it's okay to, reach out and talk to people and providing the resources. And so at WashU, they're luckily, for the residents specifically, there are 2 counselors that are assigned to them. And so it's not a psychiatrist. It's not something that goes on their record. They don't have to pay for it. And so it's something where I just hand you the email and then you do the rest. And so also letting them know that their peers, without obviously identifying the peers, had already reached out. And there were peers who were telling me, oh, I benefited greatly from talking to this person. And so making them feel like you're not the only one, and letting them know that your colleagues too are going through it, and that this may be a resource that's valuable to you. Mental health has this stigma on it, and probably now is a great time. It's virtual. You don't even have to go into someone's office. You just pick up the phone. And so I think for me, those were the 2 main things: adaptability, flexibility, and then mental health. How do you manage that as a trainee?
I can say from my vantage point is I've been very intentional in reaching out to students, because I knew how valuable that was for me as an undergrad. So I was first generation college student, so not quite sure how to navigate college in general. And so I've kind of modeled myself after my mentor, who was John Brown, as an undergraduate, and still is. We still communicate to this day. And so and also I'm the director of the MARC program here at A&T. And so it's been very important in connecting those students with opportunities post undergrad. But of course, all the summer programs last summer were shut down. They haven't really been able to get into the lab. And so a lot of their futures kind of became in flux a little bit. And so one thing I've been doing is using my network to connect them to programs, and being very strategic about it. When an opportunity arises that I saw fit a particular student, I reach out to them directly. And so I enjoyed doing that for students because it was done for me. So I get my gratification from, kind of passing it forward in that way. And so I think it's important for those of us who have the network, and then we know that there's students who's looking for opportunities, to make that connection happen. And so I feel like over the past year, I've been able to strengthen the network through Zoom and those kind of things. I connect with people I haven't connected with in years, actually. So I've used the positive parts of using Zoom and with the unfortunate COVID situation to really foster relationships a little bit more over this past year. And so my network, I think, has grown tremendously since that. And then passing that along to the students. And so giving them the comfort level to come to me if there's anything they need, if they feel like, they're not sure what they're going to do next. What I'll do is look at their profile, see their interests, and try to make the connection between the student and the opportunity. So
I like that, the connecting piece, because Dr. Chapman gave us kind of some frameworks earlier about, the different components of that mosaic. She talked about the connectors, the associates, the advocates, the mentors, coaches, and training. So thinking about, something that also that Dr. Keisha mentioned, this, well, actually I lost my thought there, so I'm going to come back to it, but thinking about building your foundation of your network. So you talked about you share your network, but you have to have that network first. So a lot of times people are trying to figure out how to build it. So she gave some categories that would help us place people, like I know this person is a great connector, this person is a great advocate. So what are strategies that you have all used to build your network or your mosaic? And I'll think about that other thought, Dr. Keisha, because I had something to tag on to what you said.
Well, I can say for me, I start with these events. So now that we're on a panel, be looking out for those LinkedIn messages coming through, because I do think it's important that when you meet people who are in a similar space or have, potential connections. One thing that I like to do is invite professionals into a course that I run, which is for careers for students trying to figure out their future careers in biology. And I'll ask professionals to come and join and talk about their journeys into whatever career fields that they have. And so I utilize this opportunity to continue to sort of build, like you said, sort of a foundation and a base for networking that will eventually turn into potential mentoring for students. So that's what I would say for that.
And I do remember the thought, it was about adaptability and flexibility. So thinking about using the different platforms and different, ways to connect, how have you leveraged that, or what are things that may have been unconventional, just for people to think, outside the box sometimes.
I can speak. I think for me, my motto that I always use when I think about mentoring and building a network, building relationships, is always first you ask for knowledge and then you ask for a favor. I think for me, I think, you have to build a relationship in times when you don't need anything. You don't need anything but wisdom. You don't need anything but experience. So then once you've built that relationship and you have that rapport and they understand, from the mentor to the mentee, they understand your drive, maybe your goals, what you're after, then they can be in position to provide opportunities and engage you on what your needs are in those times. But I think so many times I've seen students and peers wait for the time of need to try and build a relationship, and by then it's too late, right? You need to have been building that relationship, cultivating that relationship, 2 years, a year and a half previous, years previous. So I always say, it's like, nothing but maybe checking in every 6 months and saying, hey, can we go, grab, break bread? Can we go just connect for maybe 30 minutes? A phone call goes a long way to build those relationships once you do meet those points. And I think that's the message I send to anyone trying to build a network, to do those things. I think it's the healthy way to go about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that actually happened, I think, more often this year, talking to the medical students, right? So now we're talking about pipeline. So how can we give back? And so I'm taking a step back from the residency and fellowship, and now talking to the residents who are interested in the field, or so the medical students who are second or third year medical students. And so I think that's great advice, that you build the relationship before you ask for the letter of recommendation. You're not asking for the letter of recommendation the third week on the rotation for your medicine sub-I. Like, that's not a good time. So this is a great opportunity. I'm meeting with you early. You were proactive. You reached out. You said, I'm interested in ophthalmology. You're not applying yet. How can I help you? This is exactly what you just mentioned, Dr. Wallace, is that, yeah, go ahead and start building that relationship now, the foundation now. So a year from now, you've built something that this mentor now can write you a letter that's substantive. Because for us, like for me, I really pay attention to letters of recommendation. That's one of the strongest parts of an application. Like the scores are also similar now and they're going away. And so for me, I really try to stress to them, letters of recommendation are important. If you have a strong mentor in your corner and they write you an extremely strong letter, that's all that we're going to see. That's the only way we can distinguish you. So really, that's I think, really important to pass on. So I completely agree.
And with what was just said about letters of recommendation, I know that one strategy that has worked really well is, before you ask for a letter of recommendation, actually making sure that the person that you're asking thinks of you as a mentee. And it's like, I think really, like, often people in my generation kind of like just assume that, oh, you know me, I know you, we're all cool. But if you haven't like explicitly stated or asked that person, to be a mentor or for advice previously, I think they say putting things down on like writing makes it, solidifies it. I write like notes to my mentors, thanking them for, just all the advice that they've given or something like that before I ask for the big favors, just because it lets them know that, hey, I think of you as a mentor. I think of you as a sponsor. I will be, you know, staying in touch, and I appreciate all the things you've done up to this point. So when you hear from me in the future, just know what the relationship is. So making it plain, you know, what the Bible says, write it down and make it plain. That's a philosophy to live by in mentoring.
Yeah, and I would just jump in here for those of you that are working with students or trying to build programming to recruit students. That's a big thing that I feel as though they could use some mentoring on in terms of, you know, how to ask for a letter of recommendation. Who do you ask? You know, we've received applications for the summer undergraduate research program from recommenders, and it's clear that they don't really know who those students are. And so I think if there is a way to kind of mentor students around that and to stress the importance of how, you know, important that letter is, there's definitely an opportunity there.
I agree, and I actually had this question from the graduate school for MD PhD students. So there's an MD PhD student applying to ophthalmology, and they reached out and said, hey, we have these students, but they're not sure about whether they should get a letter from their PI. And I'm like, what? Like, why would you not get a letter from your PI? Like, this person has been with you for 4+ years. Like, of course that's a letter. But again, the med students don't understand this, right? They're thinking, I'm applying to a medical specialty. And so for some reason, maybe the people on the other end are going to think I didn't have enough letters from that specialty. I'm like, absolutely not. Again, pick the person who's going to write you the strongest letter, pick the person who's going to support you, and have that come across on paper. Don't do yourself a disservice and think that, you know, there are certain restrictions, so to speak, on who we want to hear from in terms of the letters. So completely agree.
So something that we're talking about in terms of letters of recommendation makes me think of a tool that I use, something to address your charge, Thais, about Dr. Thais, about how do we encourage them or to, you know, give them guidance on how to pursue the ask or who you should ask. And I started to leverage peer mentoring a lot because they listen to each other, right? So Miles was one person I would always ping to, you know, get up and share, tell them what you did, because then they get a strategy. So something that I wanted to see what your thoughts are is this idea of the different types of mentors or who should be mentoring. So when we hear the word, we often think of somebody older or a teacher or someone higher up in the food chain. But as Dr. Johnson mentioned yesterday, mentorship is ageless and it crosses all boundaries of time. And since we are an intergenerational panel, I'm really interested in hearing, you know, what are your experiences in things like reverse mentoring, where, for instance, you learn from your mentees, or peer mentoring? I'd love to hear us talk about that non-traditional mentoring.
I think I have a ton of peers that I look up to, and I think that I like the idea of peer mentoring, but I still don't necessarily consider it a separate thing for mentoring. I think of all of my mentors as people that I genuinely like, and I have good relationships with, and they're friends, they're family. Some of them I would say are like second moms, people that I can confide in, that I talk to on a daily basis. And that's the same thing that you can get with anyone in your generation. I think, you know, you can learn so much from people around you and the people that you just look up to, or they've achieved one aspect of something you want to achieve. And those are great people to identify early on, and just listen to and talk to and confirm, bounce ideas back off.
And I like the bidirectional aspect of this idea of reverse mentoring. For me, I've always been the kind of person who is team first. So all of the fields that we work in, like, people are kind of, again, like a little bit sometimes self-centered in terms of your view. Like, I need to get this next step done. I need to do well on this test. I need to get this data from this project. And so for me, I always kind of try to dial it back a little bit and say, well, okay, what are our goals? To answer a question in the lab? Fine. How can we all in the lab work together to get that question answered? How can we all take care of patients? And so I think it's really nice when you think about the reverse mentorship role. It takes a level of humility. And so we kind of get rid of that old hierarchical system, where your PI or your attending is the person that knows everything, knows best, and they're not to be questioned or challenged. And instead, now embrace that, embrace the challenge, because ultimately with time, things are going to continue to change. We cannot keep up. So in a way that you have this added bonus if you have younger people, the younger generation, because now they have the updated data. Now they have the updated technology. Now they have a different mindset or different viewpoint that they can share with you, and allow you to shape now how you kind of continue to move forward and how you can grow and develop. And in turn, it's, again, like I said, kind of a bidirectional symbiotic relationship. And so for me, it's like taking that humble part of yourself and recognizing that, yes, we are 10 years ahead of you in terms of where my training has taken me. But that does not mean that you don't bring anything to the table and that you have no value. And so things, even like surgical techniques, 10 years from now, I'm not going to know the techniques that the fellows are learning, but am I going to be open to them trying it in the operating room with me? Absolutely. So you have to kind of think, again, because for the good of the patient. So if there's something that's coming along that may be more efficient or more cost effective, I think as mentors in a bidirectional relationship, that it behooves us as the reverse mentorship to be open to that.
One thing that I can say is I really do value advice from my mentees. And so, and part of that comes from modeling that occurred when I was in undergrad, and my mentor pulled me to the side one day and kind of asked for my advice, which I thought was very interesting. But it was important advice because, those of us who are professors know sometimes we deal with students who may not be as interested or don't appreciate necessarily sometimes the way classes are run, and you may get some complaints about certain situations, and this happened in undergrad. And my mentor at the time was the chair, and notice I had not joined the caravan of students to his office. And so I think because he trusted what I had to say, he pulled me to the side and said, I really want to hear what you have to say about the situation. And I was honest that it could, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of the students, it's a little bit of the professor. And that did result in a change in the professor. He valued my opinion on that. And so I use that now. So I will pull students to the side, or students that I have mentored and really value their judgment, their advice, and I will simply ask them. And sometimes if there's something that needs to be tweaked, I'll tweak it based upon what they have to say, because I put that much value in what they have to say, and know that they're very genuine students, and really have the interest of everyone in mind when they give that advice. So I do like to reverse that role. And I think that has helped us foster, some of these long-term now relationships I've had with mentees that's been now at this point over a decade and a half or so. So that's the way I would approach that, and kind of use them almost as mentors, but I'm really using their advice on how to improve and, how to continue, I think, having a positive experience for the rest of the students that's coming behind them.
And I would just add, I think for me personally, as a graduate student, I kind of always looked for mentors in someone who was at a higher level than I was. And then really not realizing that your peers can also be your mentors. And so as you kind of move into your professional life, sometimes you may need, a former colleague of yours that you went to graduate school with, or that you met through the Leadership Alliance at a summer program. So you never really know, what type of connections you may need. And so I think building on Miles' point, it's always good to foster those relationships. Just check in with those people and stay connected, even if you don't need anything at the time, because you may end up, down the road needing that person to help you apply for a position at a company or in academia. So I think that that's definitely important, just to stay connected.
One of the main lessons I've had from Kellogg is, there might be one person who can outwork me. There might be, who can do double my rate. But if I have a network of 30 people, you can't outwork 30 people, right? If I have a network of 25 who know what I don't know and can fill in those gaps for me very quickly, then you're not battling just me, you're battling my network. And I think those kind of network effects that we need to build as professionals are very important. And I think we'd be foolish to believe, any of us, that somebody who you're mentoring doesn't have value to add to what you're pursuing, your endeavors, your goals. And I think I always pursue that. I definitely, like you said, Thais, I reach out to people who are senior to me, but I also feel like through my experiences, I can provide things as well. And that just strengthens the network that people live within, because you're only as strong as your network.
I think in Dr. Chapman's framework, that these are our associates, right? And so they're also helping us stay accountable to goals or things that we aspire to. You can actually pinpoint something specific you admire about them, or some characteristic you're working on developing. I know for myself, I was a part of a women's leadership program. It's called HERS, Higher Education Resource Services, and it's a 2-week residency program. And it's really kind of to break the kind of glass ceiling around women leadership in higher education, and particularly at the senior level. But at the same time, something Dr. Keisha said is like, we're all human, right? And sometimes we put these kind of stigmas around who should be where, but then also not realizing the people in those positions are just like us, right? So when we're in these sessions, we're all talking about our goals and aspirations. And there were several moments, and it still happens now, where I would tell someone, oh, I would love for you to mentor me on something. And they would immediately respond and say, well, I would love for you to mentor me on this. And I'm like, but wait, I see you as, where I'm trying to go, but they see something that I bring. So what Dr. Keisha was saying about everybody bringing value, if we all can bring that to the conversation, regardless of the who, that really helps strengthen the mentoring relationship. So I'm going to switch gears real quick, because this comes up for me when it comes to tapping that network of 30. I think that's like a team, right? You have your team of people who really have your back and they're representing you all over. But when it comes to like really difficult moments, like now it's on you. You have a team, but at the end of the day, the decision is on you. How have you navigated, accessing your team and your network to get input, insights, on difficult situations? I call them crucial conversations, tricky conversations. It could be about negotiating on a salary. It could be about a position that you're looking for. But then at the same time, you now having to leverage the impact on your personal life, your family, all the other people that are involved, where it's not just this one-dimensional decision. So anybody there, I would love to hear how you kind of measure that out, your mentoring advice, but also when you have to sometimes just kind of shut it down,
Well, I can start. So I think coming from the gender bias, I'm going to comment on that. Historically, women don't negotiate. For some reason, we're not as aggressive, I think, about negotiating. I would say. I know it's a blanket statement, but I think if you were to take a poll of your peers, that's probably true. And so having male mentors who kind of what they've asked for, what they've gotten, is probably helpful, right? So for me, having that mentorship at WashU was important, because you don't know what other people have gotten unless you talk to other people. You have to talk to your network. Otherwise, you don't know whether or not what they're presenting to you, the offer, is something that's fair, equal, especially when you're starting out. So as a junior faculty member, I think it's really important to talk to people, both at your institution and around the country. So talk to your peers that are in similar positions. And then I think knowing your worth really helps. So know your value. You're bringing something unique to the situation if they're interested in hiring you to that position. And so I think if you know that, then it takes some of the self-consciousness, and this is both across male, female, doesn't matter, the self-consciousness out of asking for more, because sometimes you might feel like maybe you shouldn't ask for more, maybe you should just be happy with what you've been offered. And so for me, that was a big lesson when I joined faculty 2.5 years ago, was figuring out, I was happy to accept whatever the chair offered me, sign on the dotted line. But at some point I had heard conversations from my peers where they've negotiated, and I said, well, hey, why not? And so how do I start that conversation? So I went back, got my research done from my peers, both at my level and colleagues and faculty members ahead of me, and went back to the chair and said, hey, this is what I think I would like. And so we kind of met in the middle. And so that was a great learning experience for me, because I'm not the kind of person that asks for more than necessarily what someone's offering me. I kind of tend to kind of just plateau, kind of toe the line. And so I think really, if you know your worth, then you're not as self-conscious, because you believe that you're asking for something that you deserve, right? And so I think that is kind of how I manage that situation. One of the situations I thought was challenging because I don't like to ask people for things.
From what I've seen, I noticed even in myself, I have a tendency at least to crowdsource information, and I'll ping as many people as possible to get diverse, as many diverse streams of information or perspectives. But I think at some point that has to stop, and you have to be able to reflect and then, turn on your own algorithm to decipher that. And that's kind of the hardest part, right? We always wish there was like a crystal ball, or there was a easy button that could kind of just spit out an answer for us, on anything, whether it's life, personal, buying a car, buying a house, which grad school, all those decisions, right? They feel like major life decisions. But I think that's the part of like developing your own leadership style and your own sense of who you are, is like that has to turn off at some point, and rubber has to meet the road.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually made a really difficult decision before coming to Brown, actually. So I completed my PhD, and then I went and I did a postdoc for a year at Harvard Medical School, and decided I didn't want to do bench science anymore. I wanted to go into the private sector. So I started working for a healthcare insurance company as the manager of analytics for their pharmacy program. So it was kind of related because I received my PhD in pharmacology. So I basically learned how to, write algorithms, and was managing analysts who are much older than I was, and was in the industry for a long period of time. So I worked my way up. The company was like a medium-sized company when I joined, and we grew exponentially during Obamacare and acquired a few companies. And so because I knew all of the senior level executives in the company, and I was a hard worker, and I did what I needed to do, I basically rose all the way up to VP of analytics for the company. And I was there for 7 years, but I wasn't happy, and I knew I wanted to make a change, and I wanted to come back to academia, or come, into academia. And so it was really a hard decision, because I had built up so much self-worth around my title and all of the sweat equity that I had put into that in developing my career. It was really a battle of, okay, do I make this move for, in order to help people and really give back and be fulfilled, or do I stay in this position because I'm at this level now? And, so I feel like it was a battle, and I did look to mentors to help in terms of, their experience and their thoughts. But at the end of the day, as Anjuma mentioned, you really have to stop doing that and evaluate what is right for you. So having mentors does help, but at a certain point, you really kind of need to take stock of, your own decisions and the information and experiences that you gained as an individual. So anyway, just building on that, I think that's important.
And I think to highlight, just piggyback on both of you, because both of those are great comments, is that I think if you have a good mentor, that they will understand that. And so for me right now, because I'm similar in a way, so I was MD PhD, but I'm not doing basic science. I decided by the time I got finished with the residency 18 years later, that that was not the path that was going to make me happy. And so finding people, so my chair understood that, right? So you're looking at an MD PhD, and I'm telling you, I'm not going to do basic science. And he says to me, that's fine. Like, do what you love. You are invested in education. You like to teach. Do what you love. And so for me now, having had that same experience that you had in a way of not feeling like I had to pursue a certain path because I had this training, or I've had these degrees that I acquired. And the way I explain it to my trainees now is, well, I gave myself the flexibility, right? Like I got the degrees and then figured out this is what I want to do with it. So never, ever, ever feel pigeonholed by what you've done so far. And always feel like you can change lanes, because at the end of the day, all you should be doing when you're done training and when you're done playing the game, because you do have to play the game a little bit with all these interviews and, up to a certain point, when you're done with your training though, you can stop playing that game of telling people what you think they want to hear and tell them what you are passionate about. What do you want to do? So I agree with both of you. Make yourself happy and feel free to change lanes and talk to people.
I think in the same string, really important for people that are on this side of the mentee relationship is knowing which mentors are like career mentors versus mentors that are like life mentors or like self-care mentors. And when you ask those mentors, taking the advice that you get at face value. So I will say that, you know, for me, when I was picking like grad schools and stuff, you would go to all your mentors and you would ask, you know, what's the best move, and you get as many people in your sample population as possible. And then you sit back and you're like, this is like completely conflicting advice. Why would, you know, half the group tell me that this is the best move, and then the other half say, do what's best for you? And then you have to then at some point you have to ask yourself, and the question is, what type of question am I asking? Am I asking, you know, these mentors, what is the best career move? Or am I saying what is going to be the best for Miles? And that is kind of the main thing that helps me decide, especially grad school in the past year. I had like 4 schools that I could have gone to, and I was looking and like, okay, there's different ranks to these schools, different funding opportunities. But when I was asking different mentors, they're like, some are like, oh yeah, you need to go to the top, the best one you can get into, the one that's going to be the most rigorous. And then there's the mentors that are like, pick the one that makes you happy. And when ultimately I decided that the question I was asking was a life question. It wasn't just career. I mean, I care about my career, but especially with everything that had gone on in the past year, I was asking a life question. So I went with the life mentors. And I think that drawing that differential early on before you ask the question will be great to, you know, stopping the internal dialogue.
But the key is they're not both wrong, though. Like,
yeah,
that's the
one of
trick.
them's wrong. Just know which one is wrong.
Yeah.
So I actually love that example, Miles, because the example I was going to give is related to exactly what you were just talking about. And so imagine yourself in 20-something years having to make these kind of decisions. And that came about as me becoming the interim chair of the department, and sort of the way it occurred. You know, there's a lot that goes on with the administration, but, you know, I was asked to sort of take over as the interim, and I got conflicting advice. I had to sleep on it for 2 or 3 days. But in the end, I had to make the decision. So there were some people saying, I don't know if you should do it under these conditions. And others said, well, you're built for this position, so I think you should do it. And I think it'll work its way out. And actually, over the past year, I didn't expect the pandemic to hit in the middle of my interim chairmanship. But I think in retrospect and reflecting back and talking to faculty members, I think I was the right person during the pandemic for, you know, for the position. So you're going to be faced with those type of questions probably the rest of your life. And so I'm now appreciative and glad I did it. And so, you know, we're moving to the next phase of hiring someone permanent for the position. So we'll find out what happens with that. But at the end of the day, I can now appreciate what other people saw in me that I didn't necessarily know I had, because I was asked to do it and I was freaking out, like, I don't know if I can do this or not. But the dean, I think, saw that I could, and other people saw that I could do it. And, you know, so far it's been good. And I've been able to rely upon my network to help me get through, you know, this past year and a quarter, year and a half. So yeah, so that very, very good examples that will parallel 20 years later, potentially for Miles. So
I'm loving this conversation. I'm hearing a lot of themes like flexibility. I've heard you say that a few times, Dr. Keisha. So one thing I know, one of our colleagues at Xavier, Miles, I don't know if you remember Dr. Melvina, she would always talk about the PhD. She's like, if you can do this, you can flex into anything. That's what the training is. It's the muscles that you gain in the training that you should now transition. So same here, I have a PhD and transition away from the bench. But that moment of thinking about it and trying to realize, like Dr. Danjuma said about, you know, what you have, your self-assessment, you know, you had to do this self-reflection and self-assessment to know the skills you already have. I think sometimes we're looking to skills to gain versus, you know, what we already have to help us navigate those moments. And there are a lot of mentors that see things in us that we haven't identified. So it really is helpful to have the different perspectives. But I like when you said that doesn't mean anyone was wrong. They see different things. And you then have to like put it together in a bundle, sit it aside, do the reflection, kind of view it outside, and then decide what you want to do. So this is a really great multifaceted way of looking at, your mentorship experience. So one thing that everybody has talked about over the past day and a half so far has come up with self-care, or taking care of yourself. I even heard us talking about the students and things like that. So we know life can throw us curveballs. 2020 was one. And then sometimes those things actually have long-term impacts on us and our communities, and particularly emotionally. And with COVID-19, it might be physically. So how can or have your mentors supported you in taking care of yourself? So I know that might be your life mentors, Miles. Or as they say on a flight, how have they helped you put your mask on first? Because a lot of us sound very service oriented. We want to mentor and we always want to be there for others. But sometimes we need someone else kind of helping us to look back to take care of ourselves. So how is the self-care mentoring working for you all?
The first thing that comes to mind, I apologize if this analogy fails, but it's like the cat. It's like, this is self-esteem, right? It's not somebody else to do this job for us, right? Like, these are questions that we have to learn how to live with. And I think reflection is a big part of that, like learning how to take in lessons. I think so many times, even for myself, things happen, and the lesson is only gained when you spend time to reflect and think about and acquire that lesson. Like, if you just let it breeze by and don't live in it, just one moment to the next, transitory, you won't gain any of those lessons. So I think, like I said, mentors for me they can help us think through things. But it comes up to that 80%, once you get to that 85 last, like, you have to close the door on the lesson and bring it home for yourself. And I think that's been important for me to remember, is like, even mentors, as much as I look to them and I have idols and people that I take lessons from, it's like the work has to be done at some point by the individual. And I believe that's just something I believe.
I'm kind of similar. So I think sometimes you luck out in life in terms of the way you're wired. So I'm a don't sweat the small stuff kind of person, and always have been. So that's worked for me. I haven't had to look to other people. And actually for me, like, yeah, with COVID, just kind of moving forward, I just have been, this is what I have to do. I have to go take care of patients today. I don't get to go hang out with anyone. I don't get to leave the country and go see my family. But at some point I will. And so for me, optimism, I think, like he's saying, like, you just have to find the positive or whatever your personality trait is and use that, I think, within a challenging situation to make that situation better or survivable, I guess, is one way to think about it. And so I think it's harder to have an external force do that for you, because I try to be that source for my peers, like, and I don't mean at work, but I mean my friends from medical school, or my friends from wherever, as they maneuvered it. You can't really do that on their behalf. You can tell them, well, this is what works for me. And I wish it worked for you, because, that would really simplify things. But at the end of the day, I think the mentor can only just be there, I guess, to support you. They can't help you through that mask flight going down situation necessarily, besides providing the support. You kind of have to have that and train yourself and kind of, again, like you said, self-reflect, like, find it. Like, you may not think you have it in you, but maybe if you sat down and really thought about it, you could find ways to cope with the challenges a little bit better if you just kind of took some time to do it.
And I would say accept that you're good at doing some things. Sometimes I know for me that's been a challenging, somewhat of a challenge in a way. Whereas I'm like, okay, I hopefully things are going well, and then there's faculty members or people who work for me, like, you really are doing a great job at this. And I think sometimes accepting that, and it's not, again, source, it's not anything like that, but accept the fact that you are good at this, at doing what you're doing. And that's something I try to get across to mentees, because I do have to, people tell me that, like, okay, you're doing a good job at this, don't worry about it. Things are going great, things are going well, continue doing what you're doing. And I do say the same thing to mentees, like, you're doing very well. You'll be fine. You'll get into that medical school. You'll get into that graduate school. Relax, take a break, have some fun, and those kind of things, because people have to remind me to do that as well. And I know it's important for students to be able to relax sometimes and not be so stressed out about getting an A versus an A minus. An A minus is fine. A B plus is just as fine. A B is just as fine. And you get a lot of those students, and a lot of students I mentor who are just driven students, right? And they feel crushed if they get anything less than an A. And so reminding them, and I've had to do this, unfortunately, is giving a few students their first B in a class and seeing them cry, which has happened in my office. But I know that it's important for them to experience challenges now so that you'll be sustained when you do get to your medical school and graduate school, that everything will be just fine. And so that's the way I sort of look at that question that you've asked.
Yeah,
I'm still trying to get my self-care together.
No, sorry, go ahead, Miles.
Oh no, I was just saying I'm still trying to get my self-care together. So I'm taking in all the advice that y'all are giving.
Well, that was one of the reasons, this is an intergenerational panel. So you can even hear the positionality of how people handle these things based on where they are in their career stages and life experiences. And sometimes those muscles are still being developed. And that's why you have Dr. Chico's right there to kind of point people back to themselves, reassure them, affirm them. So we're here for you, Miles, on that self-care journey. Thais, you had something?
Yeah, I was just going to add to say, give yourself that grace and acknowledgement sometimes. When I reflect back and when I was pursuing kind of making a career move and changing directions and also like applying for more senior level positions, I always reflect back to my thesis advisory committee and, presenting and on that day and who was on my committee. And I'm like, if I can do this, if I can get up in front of that group, one of which basically has a patent for Remicade and is, and has built a building named after him, then I can do anything. Like I can go talk to the CEO, I can go talk to whomever. And that's really, I always come back to that. And I always remember how I felt that day, walking into the room and walking out. And I always use that kind of as inspiration for myself. So hopefully, Miles, that's helpful for you. But yeah, I think giving yourself that acknowledgement and telling yourself like, I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here and I can do this. And I think to Joanda's point about, I have the skills because I've gone through this experience, I think is so valuable.
And this is a good moment. I think we have a audience member that has a comment. So this is open now. If you have any questions or things you'd like to add or share or ask to the panelists, this will be an open chance for you to communicate with them. Dr. Gordon, your mic is muted. Let me see if I can send you a request here. I think I sent a request for you to unmute. Do you see it?
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. First of all, let me say that I have enjoyed the panel and all of you in your sharing. Now, I have to get off because I teach a class at 2 o'clock here at Dillard. And for the last 2 years, I've taught this particular religion class at Dillard, the Black Church in America. But my experience has been more in the church, naturally, because I pastor a church here in New Orleans. I've been a pastor for the last 34 years. But all that I shared has helped me because I've had the same type of situation as far as having mentors. And then, of course, and some others considering me as their mentor as I've gone further in the preaching pastoral ministry. Now, my experience has been a little bit different because my father was one of my mentors because he was also a pastor for 52 years. But in my time of preaching, I also came under the guidance of many other senior pastors. And what I just wanted to share was that one has to be open to recognize that you don't know everything. And that's a common mistake among young people as we're in a certain age, sometimes in our 20s, and all of that. And we think we this and we that, and we got it all together. And it happens to preachers also. But you have to realize that you don't know everything. Yes, you have a gift that has been given to you by God himself, but the gift needs to be developed. And I think when you understand that, you realize you do need a mentor. And then as you go along, God has a way of putting people in your path who you can help. So all that you have shared today, I agree with all of it. And I must say, I have learned I've gotten some pointers from my, how to deal with people, because in the congregation, there are all sorts of people and they're looking toward you. So this has really been beneficial to me today. And I just want to say that before I have to get off. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing that insight. We should have had you on the panel too, because it's a very important perspective, because we talked about personal, experiences and life experiences, and people are tapping into different communities for those resources. So the mentorship is definitely happening in different ways. So thank you so much for sharing. Any more comments or thoughts, insights? Miles, you look like you were about to. Did you have something, Miles?
No, thank you so much, Professor Gordon, for joining us. I'm, an ex-U alum, so there's that rivalry there. But it's good to see that you're doing great work at Dillard.
Well, then I would like to thank our panelists for being so open and transparent about experiences. I was told that we had flexibility on the end time, so I go with the organic flow. It seems like we've arrived at a good place to wrap it up. And I appreciate the opportunity to help moderate this. And I've learned a lot from each of you, hoping to network some more from this experience. And I'm going to do my job here, which was to make sure not to do that. There we go. Do you see this screen? Okay. So in closing, we want to thank everybody for participating in this virtual mentoring conference, and there will be a post survey that will be sent, and attendees will be eligible to receive a digital badge for participation. But in order to receive that digital certificate of completion, you will have to do what you did today, attend the conference, and submit that template to the Leadership Alliance Executive Office. If you didn't get that, I'm assuming it'll get mailed out again after the conference ends, and also complete the post-conference survey. So if you're not looking for the badge, the minimum we would love is if you would complete the post-conference survey for today. And that includes our panelists, since we all participated in different ways. But I'd like to thank you all for the time today. And Thais, you can start recording.